Welcome to a special episode of Firebreathing Kittens. This is our rules discussion where we discuss the rules we played in the past dozen games for October 2024. We'll discuss the ttrpgs 24-hour crime scene, Dicing with Death, Honey Heist, Twisted Wishes, CBR+PNK, which is probably pronounced cyberpunk, Darksome Delve, Lost Roads of Lociam, Exuviae, Sexy Battle Wizards, Roll for Shoes, and LURPS. Let's dive right in. I'm going to be reading these reviews that were written by our Firebreathing Kittens players and GMs. The episodes The Involuntary Time Detectives and Old Cases, New Faces featured the RPG system 24-hour crime scene. The first review says, 24-hour crime scene. Highly improvisational, low GM game with simple, straightforward mechanics and rules. Worked surprisingly well over audio. Could have worked pure theater of the mind. Very similar idea to the Quiet Year and Disaster Tour in the sense that they both make use of playing cards and associated prompts to drive the story forward. I loved our GM's tweaks to the rules to enable the companion episode to happen without detracting from gameplay. Here's a second review from a different person. 24-hour crime scene is a highly improvisational game where anything goes. I personally think the fact that a cogent story developed speaks more to the skills of the players than to anything the rules of the game brought to the table. And even then, each player produced their own story leads and pursued separate stories. By the end of the game, everyone had differing accounts of how the crime happened and why, but conveniently agreed on the criminal. 24-hour crime scene flips ttrpgs on their head by leaving all structure and decision-making to the players, essentially making the game master outmoded and unnecessary. There are no real stakes, success is guaranteed, and the only element of randomness is a vague prompt that can be repurposed to anyone's ends without much thought. I had a good time getting to know everyone's characters. I enjoyed the world we made, but I learned nothing about the GM and did not enjoy engaging with 24-hour crime scenes, systems, or rules. The third review says, quote, in 24-hour crime scene, the players construct a series of events and clues that can meld together very well. The onus was definitely heavier on the players than other TTRPGs in that the GM or DM had a much smaller role in our version. I think our GM came up with a good premise and kept the action going, but it seems like the whole premise is to be a GM-less system. I think the system would take some getting used to, and you would have to play with friends that have a good collaborative mindset. I could see responses from players could be contradictory or go nowhere and make the play frustrating. The victory condition is strange in that the culprit is voted upon by the players. It worked well in our game, but I credit the players in the game as I can see disagreement grow to antagonism and ruin the experience. Very improvisation-based and a complete lack of combat, so may not be for all players. The next review says, quote, in 24-hour crime scene, players take turns flipping cards, answering your choice of 2 question prompts associated with that card, and then inventing a new clue about the crime scene or suspect. By the end of playing the game, you as a group will have invented many clues and interrogated up to 4 suspects. In the end, you all vote on who to charge for the crime. I am used to writing mystery stories very meticulously, so I was curious what this would be like. It mostly worked, and did feel like the story we collectively improv'd had meaning. But the contradictions when a member's contribution didn't completely make sense or had a tiny detail that made it invalid ruffled my internal feathers. The emotional feeling it left me with was like baking a cake with friends that only has a tiny turd on the top left of it that if you all squint and look at carefully, you can ignore, but you still wouldn't be thrilled about someone cutting slices and handing you one. I'm still glad I tried something so completely different, though. Here is our last review of 24-hour crime scene. 24-hour crime scene is an improvisational crime and mystery-solving game where the players create and solve the murder together. Mechanically, it is similar to the Quiet Year, where you have cards and prompts, and actions you can take on your turn to establish facts about the case. The game plays in about 3 hours. I ran this game 3 times, once using the rules as written to prepare for the companion episodes I ran, and then twice as a GM for those episodes. Because the episodes fit into the meta plot of our setting and characters, I provided the setup clues rather than having them provided by players. I also provided a list of persons of interest so the players would have some reference points if they wanted to tie the murder to extant NPCs and make it easier on the GM, which of course they did not do. The main criticism I have has to do with the gameplay loop of creating clues and then tying them to suspects and making them into evidence. First, it is not required to have sufficient evidence to charge a suspect. The players could simply vote to accuse someone who didn't have much evidence against them at all. Second, the way the gameplay works, a suspect needs to be declared with a player's turn before they can have evidence associated with them. A clue needs to be created before it can be associated with a suspect and therefore become evidence. At the start, there are only supposed to be a few clues, 1 per player, which doesn't provide a rich enough field of clues for players to work with to establish evidence. In my opinion, this could be solved in one of 3 ways. First, you could come up with some playsets, a crime scene that is already populated with some clues, like we did for our game. You could create a random table of clues that can be drawn from, or you can allow all players to contribute not 1 but 2 clues at the crime scene before beginning play. This game does suffer from violating Chegg's rule. Just to clarify, as the reader of this feedback, I'm going to spell that because I don't know if I pronounced that right. It was spelled Czege. Chegg? I don't know. Anyway, going back to reading this review. This game does suffer from violating Chegg's rule, which is a guideline in game design that the same player cannot set up a problem and solve it. However, I think it doesn't really suffer in doing so, as the problem and answer being set up is really just a way to reveal new clues and information. Finally, I find when replaying The Quiet Year that I like to remove a few cards so that the prompts aren't always the same. I feel like having a larger set of prompts available and then shuffling only 12 each of black and red cards into the deck would be a good way to handle this. For example, if there were prompts for the suit of clubs and the aces, and you would just pull 12 cards from the clubs and spades to use for the knight prompts. This would add more variety when playing the game more than once or twice. In general, this was a fun game with a great way to generate and solve a story collaboratively, and one I will bring to conventions and play in games on demand and other pick-up-and-play GM-less opportunities. This concludes all the feedback for 24-Hour Crime Scene. The episode One Flew the Coup featured the RPG system Dicing with Death. The first review says, quote, "Dicing with Death is a very easy system to understand and play. The cooperative nature of the game allows for a lot of freedom. There needs to be some more development for making it a one-shot, parentheses, if the creator wants it to be used as a one-shot, end parentheses. With so many wounds, 9, it doesn't feel like combat has any stakes." The second review for Dicing with Death says, quote, "Dicing with Death is currently in a playtest stage, so this feedback probably won't apply to the finished game. As it is now, enemies deal 1 minor wound when they hit your character. The current rules say that your character dies if they receive 9 minor wounds. Because I purposefully put all my dice into attack and only had 1 defense dice, I expected to get pretty close to dying. But during playtest, bargaining during the defense roll resulted in my character never taking even 1 minor wound. There was no danger of me reaching 9 minor wounds and dying. Because the defense dice protects your character from getting wounded sometimes, fewer minor wounds than 9 being lethal could increase the player's feeling of danger and peril." That concludes our feedback for Dicing with Death. The episode Beelines and Bear Hugs featured the RPG system Honey Heist. I will read the first review for Honey Heist. Quote, "Honey Heist is a one-page game with a simple mechanic and a cute premise. You are all bears trying to steal honey. You have 6 stat points divided between 2 stats, bear and criminal. If either stat reaches 6 points, you lose. To see if you do something successfully, roll a 6-sided dice trying to match or be lower than your stat number. It was a bit unclear when numbers move from one stat to another. I liked that we were encouraged to do flashbacks to how we planned the heist. End quote. Next review. Quote, "The system was very easy to use. I did not like how difficult it was to maintain an even split. It seems like throughout the game, your stats naturally go more towards bear, and there's not a ton you can do to realistically keep them low, especially if there are a lot of dice rolls. I think it would be better if you were able to decide how to allocate your stat points in the beginning, and they stayed that way throughout the entire game." End quote. Here's our last review for Honey Heist. Quote, "Honey Heist is a hilarious and quirky tabletop RPG where you play as criminal bears planning a heist. The rules are simple, making it easy for both new and experienced players to jump into the action. The blend of heist planning with the bear's unpredictable instincts leads to chaotic and funny situations that keep everyone entertained. The game shines in its flexibility and absurdity, allowing for creative freedom and plenty of laughs. Whether you're sneaking past guards or causing bear-sized mayhem, Honey Heist offers a fun and memorable experience that doesn't take itself too seriously. It's perfect for a light-hearted gaming session full of ridiculous antics." That ends our Honey Heist reviews. The episode Your Twist is My Command featured the RPG system Twisted Wishes. The first review says, quote, "Twisted Wishes was a fun subsystem of Tricube Tales, focusing on giving wishes as a djinn, but as twisted as possible. While the rules are a little confusing to interpret without previous experience, the system is a great sandbox world that allows for the players to truly drive the story." Our second review for Twisted Wishes says, quote, "Twisted Wishes. I had a blast playing this game. Thematically, it was ideal for the devious role player. The mechanics are relatively simple despite some confusion on our part. Some wording could be adjusted to make this easier to grab as first-time players. A diagram a player of ours used brought the rules to life more than the actual rules did. Failures within the game lacked any drama, something for the developer to consider. Ideal for a one-shot." End quote. The next review says, quote, "Twisted Wishes is a one-page Tricube Tales game. The Tricube Tales games all have the same 4 character stats: perk, quirk, trait, and concept. Left, right, up, down. Imagine a plus sign. The horizontal axis adjusts roll difficulty, and the vertical axis adjusts number of dice. You normally roll 2 6-sided dice. If what you're trying to do matches your trait, roll 1 more, so that's 3 dice. If what you're trying to do doesn't match your concept, roll 1 less, so that's 1 dice. If you fail during combat, you take 1 damage to your resolve. If you fail on a roll but are within 1 of the difficulty number, like if you rolled a 3 but the difficulty was 4, you can roleplay how your perk would help you and spend 1 karma to lower the difficulty by 1. If you're out of karma, or the hit point word, which is resolve, you can roleplay how your quirk would hinder you, making the roll 1 harder. Succeed when rolling with a quirk, and recover your choice of resolve or karma. Fail when rolling with quirk, and you can still recover a karma. And those are the rules. For me, I thought that Twisted Wishes was the most fun setting of all the Tricube Tales games I've played so far. It was really fun to get to be a genie and twist the wishes of the people who summoned us. Thus ends the Twisted Wishes feedback. The episode Wrestling with Cases featured the RPG system CBR+PNK, which probably is pronounced cyberpunk. The players and Game Master didn't have any reviews for this one, but it sounded like they had fun playing it. Thus ends the CBR+PNK section. The episode Core Delveloppment featured the RPG system Darksome Delve. Here's our review for this system. Quote, "Darksome Delve was easy to create a character in. To play, you roll a pool of dice equal to your hit points. If there's 1 of a number, that's a single. 2 of a number that's a double, and 3 of a number is a triple. You can spend a double or a triple to activate special character abilities. I liked the concept and enjoyed how the author adapted the same skills for exploration, role-playing, and combat. I can imagine that because hit points determine how many dice you roll at the start of a combat to get your attack pool, having fewer and fewer hit points would lead to a catastrophic chain reaction of failure. The first person to lose hit points in a battle then has fewer actions to defend themselves, and therefore loses more hit points, has fewer actions, etc., etc., a chain reaction to death. Thus ends the feedback for Darksome Delve. The episode Pumpkin Ale featured the RPG system Lost Roads of Lociam, which I will spell Lociam. The first review says, quote, Lost Roads of Lociam. I think the math on the fly is a little difficult with how many numbers can be involved. And the damage system is a little too, not short, but the threshold is too small. It shouldn't be that I get hit twice and suddenly I have -70. That just feels a little broken. Otherwise, it's a very interesting system. I like the mechanics. Our second review says, quote, Lost Roads of Lociam. The mechanics are good. I actually quite like them. The only complex thing is the math. Individually, it makes sense, and we covered all the bases. Compared to D&D, the magic, for example, you're using the same sets of mechanics for all the types of attacks, which is good. I like the fear and the modifiers that are applied because of fear and damage. It feels like your decisions matter. The way our GM framed it, asking if we want to know the information which would potentially cause insanity, was good and gave us player agency. I like the way that the modifiers scale. It's not just a -20 replaced with a -30. It's like, no, that stacks. I was reminded of Call of Cthulhu, where things can go very bad very quickly. It did have that kind of feeling to it. It was fun. I enjoyed it. The last review says, quote, I have 2 major points of feedback. Quick Start Guide and Character Creation. First, the rulebook could benefit from the addition of a Quick Start Guide, which is a 1 or 2 page long list of the core mechanics needed to participate in combat. Second, the people I tried to talk into playing with me were intimidated by the character creation process. The experience tables for advancing the 10 stats weren't intuitive and scared off a lot of new players who I tried to get to join. It was only after offering to make character sheets for my players that they were interested in joining the game. A quick start guide and a step-by-step, new player-friendly explanation of how to build a character sheet would help more people play Lost Roads of Lociam. Thus ends the feedback for the Lost Roads of Lociam. The episode, Fight of the Bumblebee, featured the RPG system Exuviae. The first feedback says, Exuviae. I love cards, so I was very intrigued to lean into a card drawing mechanic instead of a dice roll. It is a system that is designed for specific storytelling. I would certainly play it again. The second feedback says, Exuviae is a very complicated system. Our session was a good example of what can go wrong. We had a limited time and just couldn't hit the cards to get going. Because we have a fun group, I never felt frustrated with it, but we were spinning our wheels a bit. When you draw bad cards, you can't fail up. It felt like we were hitting dead ends almost. Because there's a way to lose this game, unlike in D&D when you fail and can still complete the quest, because you can fail, it felt like failing. Here's our third feedback, quote, Exuviae. The ending of Exuviae is set to success if you have added 3 truths to the conspiracy per player, or failure if you add fewer. But, like the game Solitaire, there are some random orderings of cards that are unwinnable through no fault of the player. The number of card flips required for our particular deck of cards to reveal enough truths approached the number of cards in the whole deck, and 40 skill checks in a 4-hour session is not really feasible. It might feel less crushing to have ranks of failure and success instead of a strict binary. For example, the game Hanabi, which is about fireworks assembly, gives the players a range of numbers of assembled fireworks and a range of interpretations of how poorly or well the players did. Lots of assembled fireworks, you put on a show. The crowd will always remember. Not many assembled fireworks, the crowd isn't all that impressed and soon forgets your display. Like that. It's possible that Exuviae could come with an interpretation table with a range of how much you all won or lost based on how many truths per player you uncovered. It felt like our failure was out of our control, and the game giving us a binary interpretation of that failure was a bit extreme. The story felt unfinished. Thus ends the feedback for the Exuviae system. The episode The Wench's Road featured the RPG system Sexy Battle Wizards. We have one review, and it is, quote, "I don't enjoy splitting the party, and Sexy Battle Wizards has a mechanic in it that forces the party to split up. Anytime your character dies or explodes, they respawn at the college errant. That splits your party and forces you to retrace your steps to get back to where you were. Our game master did a clever thing where the final battle with the big bad was set behind a sacrifice door, where the only way back to that final battle was to go through the sacrifice door again. I thought that was a clever way to make the mechanic that I didn't enjoy more interesting. I like that GM." Thus ends the feedback for the system Sexy Battle Wizards. The episode Nod Again featured the RPG system Roll for Shoes. Here's the first feedback. Actually, the only feedback. Quote, "Roll for Shoes. Sometimes I underestimate the games that have a small rules text. Roll for Shoes is one of those. The website has 6 rules on it, and that's it. But by the end of the adventure, I felt like I understood Roll for Shoes less at the end of having played it than when we started. I also felt like I had been tricked by the 6 rules on the main tab of the website, that when you go click on the other tabs, there are more optional but actually important rules hidden there." End quote. The episode Into Hot Air featured the RPG system LURPS, which is short for Lewis's Unified Role-Playing System. The first feedback says, quote, "There's a column called Damage Dealt in the Magic table on page 54, in the table with spell level and mana cost. Not every spell deals damage in LURPS, and that column existing implies it does. The rulebook would be easier for new players to understand if that column wasn't there." That was the first feedback. Here's the second feedback. Quote, "LURPS reminded me of playing Pathfinder in that it is a system that rewards players' interest in running down mechanical synergies and combinations. I would be interested in hearing from the creator whatever their expectation is around rounding up or down for successes or failures. It can be fun in either direction, but it certainly adjusts the math on how many dice need to be into skills. We came into this at high-level play, and at least speaking for myself with a background in D&D where characters are big heroic figures, LURPS says outright in the beginning that this is more a story of the everyman, or not necessarily heroic figures. So I just wanted to name that I imagine the experience playing LURPS at lower level with introductory characters could possibly feel punishing because of how fewer dice you have to invest in your character and levels. So players should be mindful of that for what sort of character they bring to the table, and GMs of how arduous that adventure might be." End quote. The next review says, "The LURPS system is enjoyable. I would love to play it as a lower-level character. I would enjoy the miscast being more prominent. I would like to see that element of danger brought into higher-level play as well. Perhaps with more play, that would happen more regularly. Overall, I would say if I wanted to change one thing about this system, it is a lot of dice rolling. 6d6, 7d6, it's really easy to lose track of your rolls. Maybe there could be some static bonuses or changes to DC, anything to make us roll less dice. But otherwise, I thought it was a very well thought out system. A lot of fun. A lot of flexibility to let you do what you want to do and let your characters really explore without the class limitations of other systems. You can do whatever you want as long as it's in your abilities. That was really flexible. End quote. This concludes our reading of people's rules feedback from this quarter of Firebreathing Kittens podcast. At this point, normally I do this with several other people when schedules allow, and I would ask people what your favorite game was, but it's just me, so I will chat. Of the games that we played, which includes 24-Hour Crime Scene, Dicing with Death, Honey Heist, Twisted Wishes, CBR+PNK, which is probably pronounced Cyberpunk, Darksome Delve, Lost Roads of Lociam, Exuviae, Sexy Battle Wizards, Roll for Shoes, and LURPS. My favorite of those. Let me think about it. Probably Darksome Delve. I do recognize that there are some problems with the catastrophic failure cycle. Like, that feedback had a good point. When you roll a number of dice that is based on your hit points, if you get punched and your hit points go down, the person punching you is coming at you strong and you have less dice to face them with. So that is definitely, I understand that. That is a catastrophic failure, like, cycle, downward spiral. So I get that. But until it happens to me, I'm not going to really emotionally understand that. So my brain says I like that system, and I'm sure my heart would disagree after having been catastrophically failure spiraled, but until then, it was just a fun game to play. The feedback saying that there were different ways to interpret your character sheet based on if you were in a narrative challenge and a combat challenge was also, I thought that was really cool. I would like to play with that more, the way that you can, like, manipulate objects with one skill and people with that same skill in, like, a narrative sense. It was cool. It was different. I haven't played with very many systems that use singles, triples, and doubles like that, and it's something that you could do. I don't know why other systems don't do it. It's just clever and different, and I say that, but then I'll encounter 10 games that do it, so, like, then it'll stop being so unique. But for now, that was pretty unique. So I think that was definitely the highlight this quarter for me was Darksome Delve, personally. Anyway, next part. Most excited about what upcoming game? Let's see. Some of the upcoming games are Alien, Action 12 Cinema, Here at the End, Dungeon Caster, and then Pirate Borg, Cyborg, and Morkborg. I mean, a lot of those are really exciting. Alien is a really famous game based upon a very famous movie. So I'm excited just to see what, like, a really big name adaptation game is like. You know, I haven't played very many of those. The studio that made the RPG is exciting. Action 12 Cinema is supposed to be like playing through a bad action movie, which is honestly, that's like the reason why I play tabletop role-playing games. When I describe why I like tabletop role-playing games to people, I say, do you like watching movies? Well, you're going to really like being in the movie and in charge of the movie. And so Action 12 Cinema, I feel like the designer of that and me were thinking along the same lines, like, what is really fun about this? You know, I don't know how well it's going to translate into play. I also am very excited about that one because it's a GM-less game. Some of those work very well and some of those don't translate very well into play. So Action 12 Cinema is definitely exciting. Looking forward to that. Might be entirely terrible, might be really fun. Just gonna have to play it and find out. Here at the End is a ridiculous premise. You play people dying in an assisted living or, like, elderly home, and, like, it ends with all of you dying of old age. What a very strange, unusual concept for a TTRPG. It's the season finale because literally at the end you all die. But the question is, do you take the world with you? And I was just like, okay, well, I guess let's either save or doom the world as we tell stories in our old folks' home. That's wild. So I have no idea if that's going to work or not. It also uses a tarot deck to generate prompts. It's, again, a relatively GM-less system. Don't know how that's going to go. Very interested in how that turns out. It's definitely not something that you can build a campaign around. Then there's Dungeon Caster, which the simplicity of that system is one of its strengths. It's a very short rule book. And then there's, talking about rule books, Pirate Borg, Cyborg, and Morkborg. Morkborg is possibly the most famous rule book for tabletop role-playing games that exists because of the art that's in it. It's supposed to be I've heard it said by other people that the rulebook for Morkborg is so pretty that each page is like artwork. That you could take the pages of this rulebook and just like hang them on your wall. So I'm excited about, I'm not really playing that one, but just like reading the rulebook for that one, which is very strange to say, but I'm excited to read the rulebook for Morkborg. So those are our upcoming games. Alien, Action 12 Cinema, Here at the End, Dungeon Caster, Pirate Borg, Cyborg, and Morkborg. I hope you catch us in the upcoming quarter, and if maybe you heard some systems that you liked in this rules feedback, you've got the title for the episode, you can go listen to those and check them out and play them with friends. Bye!